think I hear a fly buzzing. Okay. This week, I'm gonna take you guys through some of the wholesome meals that we eat pretty much every week. You guys know I'm a mom of 4 and I have kids who are picky, and I feel like as they get older, they get pickier. So I'm constantly trying to kind of keep up with that. But there are some things that I know my family's gonna eat. And so I like to just keep it part of our weekly meal plan. I don't meal plan specifically, but I like to keep things in rotation. It just makes it easier. So the first thing I'm making is I'm gonna make a rustic rotisserie style chicken. So instead of buying it from the grocery store, I'm just gonna go ahead and make it homemade. So I've got a whole chicken that I rinsed, and then you can just pat it dry with a towel or paper towels. And then basically we're just gonna let this cook low and slow. So I put it on a parchment lined baking sheet, and then I'm gonna season it up with lots of spices. So I keep them really simple though. So I'm gonna do paprika, sea salt, black pepper, some poultry seasoning, garlic powder, and onion powder. So just staple house seasonings here. Okay, so after I mix up my seasoning blend, I like to go ahead and I take my chicken that's on my baking sheet with my parchment paper, and I go ahead and take a little bit of avocado oil. I like to use this since I'm roasting because it has a higher smoke point. So I'm just gonna take a little bit of this and I'm gonna spritz it all over the chicken, and that helps the rub stay on it and kind of stick to it. And then I'll top it with just a little bit of butter because I love the flavor butter gives and like the brown buttered flavor. But you want to go ahead and coat the full thing, that way there's flavor just in every little bit. You can even go inside the cavity of the chicken. That's a really good trick. And I'll leave the exact measurements for the seasonings down below so you can do the same exact thing. And I love to use the avocado spray for this. That way it just evenly distributes all the oil. And then instead of rubbing in my seasonings into the chicken like I normally do with other meats, I like to leave it just sprinkled on because I feel like it gives the chicken a better crust. So that's a little trick to getting like a nice crusty chicken like you would at a store. And I like to make it homemade because then I can use my own seasonings. They're usually organic, and I can use good quality oil instead of like soybean oil at the grocery store. And then I will cover it with my parchment paper. So instead of foil, I will use that parchment just because it's a non-toxic alternative, and I'll put that in the oven to roast low and slow. So I love to do batch cooking where I'm just in the kitchen, and while one thing is cooking, like this roast chicken that's gonna take a little while, I can go ahead and be doing other things, so I can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I just rinsed out my Instant Pot liner. I had soup from last week in it, and now I'm gonna go ahead and fill it back up with soup. So this next thing I'm going to make, you could do it on the stove in a big stock pot or Dutch oven, that's perfect. But it's also really good to do it in an Instant Pot because you can sear up the veggies first and then just make the soup in there and keep it on warm, or I like to let it slow cook for a long time. And a little thing I love to do is when I make soup or something or chili in my Instant Pot, I'll put it in the fridge in my Instant Pot liner, and then the next day when we go to eat it, so like this soup we'll probably eat tomorrow for lunch, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make this and I'm gonna put it in the fridge in my liner, and then tomorrow I can pull it out of the fridge and pop it right back into my Instant Pot and put it on warm mode, and it warms it up really quickly, so I can just have lunch ready to go in the Instant Pot tomorrow. So if you're new here, I do like to cook with a lot of veggies, especially on fast days. So my family, we're Orthodox Christians, and so 2 times a week and in different seasons, fasting periods throughout the year, like Nativity fast that's coming up, or our Pascha, which is Easter, we fast for 40 days beforehand, so we don't eat meat or dairy products. So I have a lot of, I guess, vegan or plant-based recipes that I like to make, and one of them is lentil soup. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my version of lentil soup today. It has a lot of greens in it and mushrooms, and it's really hearty and completely dairy-free and meat-free. So it's a really great recipe to have on hand, especially during the colder months. Oh, we lost one. So here I've got a bunch of my kale from my garden that I picked, and a little bit of Swiss chard just because I needed more kale. So this is dinosaur kale. You can definitely use curly kale, but I have this growing in the garden. And then you're also going to want to use a bunch of mushrooms. So I'm using a pound of organic, just baby Bella mushrooms. I'm gonna use a little bit of lemon, and then of course, always onion and garlic, that's a staple. And then the lentils I like to use are green lentils. You could definitely use red lentils too, that will be fine. But today I'm gonna use the green ones. I like the organic lentils, that way they don't have any pesticides sprayed on them. So I love lentils too because they're full of protein, and so so they're really great to keep you full and satisfied, especially when you're not cooking with me. So I'm excited to make some of this, and I love making soups like this a day ahead of time because they taste so much better going into the second day. They just get better in the fridge, so it's really a win-win. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this lettuce, or this kale and Swiss chard that I already washed, and I'm gonna chop this up pretty finely, chop up my onions and my garlic, and go ahead and slice these mushrooms up. So if you like a small size mushroom, you could chop them up really finely. So like maybe your kids don't love the texture of mushrooms, you could cut them up even smaller, that way they go down really easily. But I love the meatiness of mushrooms, so I'm gonna leave them just a little bit bigger today, and then we're gonna cook this all down in the Instant Pot. I use my Instant Pot in a number of different ways. So sometimes I'll pressure cook in it, sometimes I'll slow cook, and sometimes I'll just put it on saute mode and then put it on warm. So there's a lot of different functions that an Instant Pot serves, but if you don't have one, you can simply use just a regular pot. So I'm just going ahead and I'm drizzling some olive oil in here. Since I'm just sauteing, I'm going to use that instead of my avocado oil that I use for high heat. And then I'm going to add in all those veggies that we just chopped up and just get those kind of cooking down. Anytime you're cooking with lentils or dried beans, you're going to want to drain them and rinse them before you cook with them. So I like to take them, empty them into a container or a sieve, depending on how big they are. I find with lentils, it's actually easier just to use a bowl because if you don't have a really fine mesh sieve, then it's going to fall through. So I just rinse them and drain them. And then if I see any rocks, I'll pick those out because sometimes there's little bits. And then I add them into the Instant Pot and I season it with a little bit of salt. You can wait till the end because some people say that it does make lentils tough, but I personally don't ever experience this. So I always salt my lentils at the beginning and it's always fine. Next, I'm adding in tomato paste, turmeric, curry powder, and lots of different seasonings just to really give the lentils flavor because they can be pretty bland if you don't season them correctly. Then I'm going to add in a 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes. You can definitely use homemade vegetable broth if you have it. I just didn't today, so I'm using the brand Bonafide. I think it's a pretty good quality stock. So I'm using that, and then I threw in just a little bit of fresh thyme. But if you don't have that, you can leave it out and just substitute a dry bay leaf. That works too. And then I'm just going to put this on slow cook and let that cook low and slow all day long and get back to the rest of what I'm doing today. So I'm also going to take that tomato paste that I used in the lentil soup, and I'm putting the rest of it in a glass jar. So I like to use these Weck jars because once you open up a canned product, you definitely don't want to store that in the fridge in the can because it will just get a tin taste to it. So I always store everything that is opened in a glass jar. So once my lentil soup was done, I just squeezed in some fresh lemon juice for a little bit of zip and some tang. And then when it's not a fast day, we will serve it with a little bit of pecorino on top. So I went ahead and showed you this. Usually my kids will have the pecorino anyway. They love it. And this made an excellent lunch and another dinner another day. So now that I have my lentil soup going in the Instant Pot and I have my chicken that's roasting in the oven, I'm going to get started on the side that we're going to have for dinner tonight along with the roasted chicken. So this is just like a skillet full of potatoes and Brussels sprouts, and then I toss it in this homemade honey mustard sauce. But to start, all you do is put them in an oven-safe skillet, drizzle them with oil, and get them roasting in the oven at 400. So now I'm going to take those parchment paper sheets off my chicken because it's been roasting for a few hours now, a couple hours, and I'm just going to baste it a little bit and pop it back in for about 15 minutes just to get a little brown. And then once my Brussels sprouts and potatoes are done roasting in the other oven, I actually use my big oven today, I pulled it out and I popped those potatoes and sprouts in a bowl. And then in that hot skillet, I'm just adding a little bit of oil, some Dijon mustard, honey, and I'm going to add a few seasonings and a little bit of chicken broth. And this makes that honey mustard glaze sauce, and it comes together in like 30 seconds. It's the quickest thing ever, and it seems so special. So then I pop all those potatoes and Brussels back in and coat it, and this is just a really cool side. It's something unique. It would be great for the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's really just a nice spin on something we would have on a regular basis. And to give it a little freshness and brightness, and to really just polish it off and make it something special that you could serve to guests, I like to top it with a little bit of fresh herbs from the garden. So today I'm using some chives. So now my chicken is completely done. I let it cook for about 2.5 hours, and just the last 15 minutes I took that parchment off and let that skin get nice and crusty and brown. Don't be afraid to get this a nice deep color, because it's not burned, it's just those seasonings that really turn into the most delicious rotisserie chicken crust. That's another reason to make your own, because usually the store, the crust is always soggy and I have to peel it off, but at home the crust is the best part. So I just drained and washed some black beans. They're organic canned black beans, and I just rinsed them in a colander, got off all of that liquid that they're packed in. And tonight I'm gonna make a crock pot dinner. So you can definitely do it in just a normal pot or your instant pot, whatever you wanna do. But I'm gonna throw it in the crock pot because it's just the easiest. Tonight I'm gonna make kind of like a Mexican inspired chili. So with my chili, it's really easy to get stuck in a rut. I'll just make my standard chili recipe and I love it. But I wanna switch it up a little bit because I feel like every time we're heading into like a fall weekend, I want something cozy and hearty, but then I also start like wanting Mexican food and fun things that we usually only get out. So tonight I'm gonna try making like a healthy version of a Mexican crock pot chili. So I have some organic white corn tortilla chips in the pantry, and I have some shredded cheese that I can use up and some avocados that we can top it all with when it's done cooking. So I think it's gonna be really, really good. So I'm gonna use this chuck roast, and first I'm gonna get it going on my griddle. I'm gonna get my griddle nice and hot, and I'm gonna sear it on either side, which is optional. I typically don't do this, but I'm gonna do it today just to really help build those flavors. I have a little bit of time so I can do it, and then I'll just throw it in the crock pot and it'll cook low and slow all day. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that started. So I'm gonna use black beans, which are some of the healthiest beans you can eat are black beans. So I'm gonna use those today, along with lots of canned tomatoes and lots of spices. And I'm even gonna throw in a little something special to give it that Mexican flavor. So first I'm gonna go ahead and start by chopping up some of my vegetables so they're ready to go. So I'm gonna use one red bell pepper, and then you could also use green or yellow, anything. I actually like yellow because they're the highest in vitamin C, but I have a red, so I'm gonna use that. And then sweet onion and lots of garlic. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these veggies prepped up, and then we're gonna sear our beef. So this is very similar to what I would do with like a nice steak or a ribeye. I'm gonna go ahead and spray it with a little avocado oil and heavily season it with salt and pepper. And then I also did some chili powder since we're going for more of a Mexican flavor. And then I have my nice hot skillet here. It's over like medium high, but it's really preheated, so it's very hot. And then I just let that sear on either side for about 4 minutes, just until it has a nice deep brown crust. And in the meantime, I'm gonna make the seasoning blend for the chili. So I've got chili powder, I've got onion powder, I've got some cumin, I've got some garlic powder, and then I'm also gonna end up throwing in some fresh, or not fresh, but canned chipotle and adobo, and that gives it a little bit of richness, and I don't know, it just gives it a really smoky flavor, so I love it. And it's not too spicy because we're just gonna put in one. I also like to add in coconut sugar or brown sugar or date syrup, whatever you wanna add in, just to balance out that smokiness from all the peppers and the tomatoes. They need a little sugar to bring out the flavor. My oldest daughter, she's 8, and she saw me making a crockpot meal, so she immediately wanted to join in because she knows that's something she can do very easily is make a crockpot dinner. So we're adding in some crushed tomatoes. I have a big can of crushed tomatoes, fire roasted, and then a diced can of fire roasted tomatoes. I'm adding in some tomato paste to really build up that richness, and then a little Worcestershire sauce that just gives it some beefy depth. And then I'm taking that big chuck roast that I seared and I'm removing that. And then in that griddle that has all that oil and flavor from the beef, I'm adding in those onions and bell peppers, and we're just going to saute them. And it starts to smell like fajitas with the hot skillet and all. This is just, it's so good. So I saute that for a few minutes just to get up all those little bits and flavor those peppers and onions. And then I'm taking our one chipotle pepper that's in adobo sauce and I'm mincing that up really well. And then I'm going to add that in along with about a tablespoon of the adobo sauce. And this isn't too spicy. My daughter that's 2 could even eat this. So you can just do it to your taste though. If you don't want the smokiness or you want to take maybe half of the chipotle to just have a little bit of that, you could do that. And then you're going to add in all of those onions and peppers, and I add in my garlic, and then you're going to mix that all together. You can add a little bit of beef broth, but anytime I'm cooking a chuck roast, it has its natural juices that come out, so you don't really need it. So then I'm going to pop in those black beans that I drained and rinsed earlier, all of that seasoning mix, that chili seasoning mix that we made, and then you mix that up and pop in that chuck roast, and we're just going to let this cook low and slow, again, 8 hours. That is just the best way to make this fall apart tender. And this chili, you guys are gonna love it. It's amazing. Since it's another canned product, I'm just putting this in a jar. I couldn't find any of my Weck jars, so I just put it in a mason jar this time. But I love those reusable lids that are, I think they're either gray or white, but they're great because then you don't have to worry about them rusting or anything. So once the chili had been cooking low and slow, I just took that beef right in the pot and just started shredding it with a fork. It fell right apart. And then I topped it with some shredded raw milk cheese. I love that kind, just mild cheddar or sharp cheddar. And then some organic tortilla chips and avocado. And this was one of the best chilies I've ever had. It's so unique, and I hope you guys love it. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen this week.